We are live. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Chanda Balava Girivaranari Gopi Chanda Balava Girivaranari Yashoda Nandana Brajachana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Brajachana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Balava Girivaranari Yashoda Nandana Brajachana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So I don't remember exactly the verse we left off on. So the marker got moved. So I'll try to start similar place that I use as far as I can remember. Anyway, we're still in the chapter. It's Madhya Lila, chapter 6. And the name of the chapter is The Liberation of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. So I may be reading something we've read before, but no problem. Nirvishesha Tanrekaya Yeshu Jagana. Oh, this is for 141. Nirvishesha Tanrekaya Yeshu Shrutigana apakrita nisheda kari apakrita stapana. Wherever there is an impersonal description in the Vedas mean to establish that everything belonging to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is transcendental and free of mundane characteristics. Purport. There are many impersonal statements about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, Apani Pado Javano Grahita Pasyatya Chakshusa Shrinote Akaranaha Saveti Vejana Chashasti Veta Tam Ahur Agriyam Purushang Mahantam. Although the Supreme Lord is described as having no hands and legs, he nonetheless accepts all sacrificial offerings. He has no eyes, yet he sees everything. He has no ears, yet he hears everything. When it is stated that the Supreme Lord has no hands and legs, one should not think that he is impersonal. Rather, he has no mundane hands or legs like ours. He has no eyes, yet he sees. This means that he does not have mundane, limited eyes like ours. Rather, he has such eyes that he could see past, present, and future everywhere, in every corner of the universe, and in every corner of the heart of every living entity. Thus, the impersonal descriptions in the Vedas intend to deny mundane characteristics in the Supreme Lord. They do not intend to establish the Supreme Lord as impersonal. Ya shrutir jalpati nivishesham savitate savishesham eva vichara yoge satihanta tasham prayo balaya savishesham eva. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, whatever Vedic mantras describe the Absolute Truth impersonally only prove in the end that the Absolute Truth is a person. The Supreme Lord is understood in two features, impersonal and personal. If one considers the Supreme Personality of Godhead in both features, he can actually understand the Absolute Truth. He knows that the personal understanding is stronger because we see that everything is full of variety. No one can see anything that is not full of variety. Purport. This is a quotation from the Sri Caitanya Chandrodaya Natika, 6.67, by Kavi Karnapur. Brahmahaite janme vishva brahmete jivaya se brahme punarapi hayaya laya. Everything in the cosmic manifestation emanates from the Absolute Truth. It remains in the Absolute Truth, and after annihilation, it again enters the Absolute Truth. Purport. In the Taittiriya Upanishad, it is said, Ito va imani bhutani jayante. The entire material cosmic manifestation is born of the Supreme Brahman. The Brahma Sutra also begins with the verse, Janmajasha yataha. The Absolute Truth is that from whom Absolute Truth is that from whom everything emanates. The Absolute Truth is Krishna. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo matak sarvan pravartate. I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. It's Bhagavad Gita chapter 10, verse 8. Therefore, Krishna is the original Absolute Truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Again, Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita, Maya tattam idam sarvam jagat avyakta mortina. Quote, by me, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. That's chapter 9, verse 4. And is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita, Goloka eva nivasatya kakilatma bhuta. Quote, although the Lord always stays in his abode, Goloka, Vrindavan, he is still all-pervading. Brahma Samhita 5.37. His all-pervasive feature is understood to be impersonal because one does not find the form of the Lord in the all-pervasiveness. Actually, everything is resting on the rays of his bodily effulgence. The Brahma Samhita also states, Yasha prabhavato jagat anandakoti kotish vaishesha vasudari vibhuti vinam. Quote, due to the rays of the Lord's bodily effulgence, millions of universes are created, just as planets are created from the sun. And that's from Brahma Samhita 5.40, verse 40. Next verse. Padana karana adikarana karakatina Bhagavanera savisheshe etina china. The personal features of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are categorized in three cases, namely ablative, instrumental, and locative. Purport. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur states in his Amrita Pravaha Pasha that according to the injunction of the Upanishads, the Supreme Absolute Truth is He from whom everything emanates. It is understood that the whole cosmic manifestation emanated from Brahman, the Supreme Absolute Truth. The creation subsists by the energy of the Supreme Brahman, and after annihilation merges into the Supreme Brahman. From this we can understand that the Absolute Truth can be categorized in three cases, ablative, instrumental, and locative. According to these three cases, the Absolute Truth is positively personified. In this connection, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati quotes the Aitareya Upanishad 1.1.1, Atma va idam eka evagra asin nanyat kinchanam ishat sa ikshata lokan nu shrija iti. Similarly, in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad 4.9, it is stated, Chandangshi yagya Kratavo Pratani Bhutan Bhavyan Yachja Veda Vedanti Yasman Mayeshvijate Vishwan Etat Tasmings Chanyo Mayaya Chanirudaha. And in the Taittiriya Upanishad 3.1.1, Yato va imani bhutani jayate yena jatani jivanti yat prayant yabhisham vishanti tad vijigyasavya tad brahma. This was the answer given by Father Varuna when asked by his son. This was the answer given by Father Varuna when asked by his son Varuni, Brigu, about the absolute truth. In this mantra, the word Yasaha, the absolute truth, from which the cosmic manifestation was emanated, is in the ablative case. That Brahman by which this universal creation is maintained is in the instrumental case, Yena, and that Brahman into which the whole cosmic manifestation merges is in the locative case, yat or asmin. It is stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, idang hi vishwan bhagavan ivetaro ito jagatstana nirodha sambhavaha. Quote, the entire universal creation is contained in the gigantic form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everything emanates from Him, everything rests in His energy, and after annihilation, everything merges into His person. Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 5th chapter, 20th verse. These cases must be referring to Sanskrit grammar. So next verse. Bhagavan bahu haite yabe kaila mana prakrita shakite tabe kaila vilokana se kale nahi janme prakrita mano nayana ateva prakrita pramera netra mana. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu continued, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead wishes to become many, he glanced over the material energy. Before the creation, there were no mundane eyes or mind. Therefore, the transcendental nature of the Absolute Truth's mind and eyes is confirmed. Purport. In the Chandogya Upanishad 6.2.3, it is said, Tad aikshata bahu shang prajayaya. This verse confirms the fact that when the Supreme Personality of Godhead wishes to become many, the cosmic manifestation arises simply by His glancing over the material energy. It may be noted that the Supreme Lord glanced over the material nature because the creation of this cosmic It may be noted that the Supreme Lord glanced over the material nature before the creation of this cosmic manifestation. Before the creation, there were no material minds or material eyes. Therefore, the mind in which the Supreme Personality of God had desired to create is transcendental, and the eyes with which He glanced over the material nature are also transcendental. Thus, the Lord's mind, eyes, and other senses are all transcendental. Right? So, the Supreme Lord, His eyes are not material because He was glancing and thinking and so on before there was any material manifestation. So, therefore, before there were any mundane people and living entities with eyes and ears and so on. So his eyes and ears and so on are transcendental. They're not considered material. Brahma Shabde Kai Purna Swayang Bhagavan Krishna Shastrera Brahman. The word Brahman indicates the complete Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is Sri Krishna. That is the verdict of all Vedic literature. Purport. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, verse 15, where the Lord says, Vedaischa sarvar aham eva vedaha. The ultimate object of all Vedic literature is Krishna. Everyone is searching for Him. This is also confirmed elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita. Bahunang janmanamante jnanavang mang prapajate vasudeva sarvang iti sarmahatma sadurlabhaha. Quote from Bhagavad Gita, after many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. End quote. This is from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, verse 19. Chapter 7, verse 19. When one has actually become wise through the study of Vedic literature, he surrenders unto Vasudeva, Bhagavan Sri Krishna. This is also confirmed in the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, second chapter, verses 7 and 8. Two famous verses. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janiyata Yashivairagyam Jnanam Cha Yadahaitukam Dharma Swanushritan Pumsan Vishvaksena Katashuyaha Natpadaye Yati Ratin Shama Eva Hi Kevalam. Understanding Vasudeva is real knowledge. By engaging in the devotional service of Vasudeva, Krishna, one acquires perfect knowledge and Vedic understanding. Thus one becomes detached from the material world. This is the perfection of human life. Although one may perfectly follow religious rituals and ceremonies, he is simply wasting his time. Shrama eva hi kevalam. If he does not attain this perfection. Before the creation of the cosmic manifestation, the Supreme Personality of Godhead possessed his totally transcendental mind and eyes. A Supreme Personality of Godhead is Krishna. A person may think that there is no direct statement about Krishna in the Upanishads, but the fact is that the Vedic mantras cannot be understood by people with mundane senses. As stated in the Padma Purana, Atak Shri Krishna Namadi, Nabhavet Grayam Indriyai. A person with mundane senses cannot fully understand the name, qualities, form, and pastimes of Sri Krishna. The Puranas are therefore meant to explain and supplement the Vedic knowledge. The great sages present the Puranas in order to make the Vedic mantras understandable for common men. The great sages present the Puranas in order to make the Vedic mantras understandable for common men. Stri Shudra Dvija Bandhunam. Considering that women, Shudras, and Dvija Bandhus, unworthy sons of the twice-born, cannot understand the Vedic hymns directly, Srila Vyasadeva compiled the Mahabharata. Actually, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Vedeshu Durlabham, untraceable in the Vedas. But when the Vedas are properly understood, or when Vedic knowledge is received from devotees, one can understand that all Vedic knowledge leads to Sri Krishna. The Brahma Sutra 1.1.3 confirms this fact also. Shastra Yonitvat. Commenting upon the Brahma Sutra code, Shastra Yonitvat, Srimadvacharya says, the Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharva Veda, Mahabharata, Pancharatra, and the original Valmiki Ramayana are all Vedic literature. Any literature following the conclusive statements of this Vedic literature is also to be considered Vedic literature. Read that one again. Any literature following the conclusive statements of this Vedic literature is also to be considered Vedic literature. That literature which does not conform to Vedic literature is simply misleading. Therefore, when reading Vedic literature, we must take the path traversed by the great acharyas, Mahajano Yena Kata Sapanta. Unless one follows the path traversed by the great acharyas, he cannot understand the real purport of the Vedas. Next verse. Vedera Nigvada Arta Bhujana Nahaya Purana Vakya Se Arta Karaya Nishchaya. The confidential meaning of the Vedas is not easily understood by common men. Therefore, that meaning is supplemented by the words of the Puranas. Aho Bhagyam Nanda Gopa Vrajo Kasham Na Mitrang Paramanandam Puranam Brahma Sanatanam. How greatly fortunate are Nanda Maharaj, the cowherd men, and the inhabitants of Brajabhumi. There's no limit to their fortune, because the absolute truth, the source of transcendental bliss, the eternal supreme Brahman, has become their friend. Purport. This is a quotation from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 14th chapter, 32nd verse, spoken by Lord Brahma. Apani parashruti varje prakrita panicharana punakahi shigra chale kare sarva grahana. The Vedic Apanipada mantra rejects material hands and legs, yet it states that the Lord goes very fast and accepts everything offered to him. Ateva Shruti Kahi Brahma Savishesha Mukhyachari Lakshanate Mane Nivishesha. All these mantras confirm that the absolute truth is personal, but the Mayavadis, throwing away the direct meaning, interpret the absolute truth as impersonal. This is Lord Caitanya still speaking. Purport. According to the Svetashvatara Upanishad 3.19, Apani Pado Javano Grahita Pashat Jachakshu Sa Shrunot Yakarana Saveti Vejam Na Chatasyatsti Veda Tam Ahur Agriyam Purushang Mahantam. The Vedic mantra clearly states Purushan Mahantam. The word Purusha means person. That person is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita by Arjuna when he addresses Krishna. Purushang Shashvatam. You are the original person. From Bhagavad Gita chapter 10, verse 12. This Purushang Mahantam is Sri Krishna. His hands and legs are not mundane, but are completely transcendental. However, when he comes, fools take him to be an ordinary person. Avajanti mang buddha manushim danum ashritam. One who has no Vedic knowledge, who has not studied the Vedas from the bona fide spiritual master, does not know Krishna. Therefore, he is a mudha. Such fools take Krishna to be an ordinary person. Parang bhavam ajanantaha. They do not actually know what Krishna is. Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye. It is not possible to understand Krishna simply by studying the Vedas perfectly. One must have the mercy of a devotee. Yat padam. Unless one is favored by a devotee, he cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Arjuna also confirms this in the Bhagavad Gita. Quote, "My Lord, it is very difficult to understand your personality." End quote. The less intelligent class of men cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead without being favored by his devotee. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita states another injunction. Bhagavad Gita 4:34. Tadvidi paripatrena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshanaha. One has to approach a bona fide spiritual master and surrender to him. Only then can one understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a person. Shad Aishvarya Puranan Shad Aishvarya Purnanda Vigraha Yanhara Hena Bhagavane Tumi Kaha Nirakara. Are you describing as formless the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose transcendental form is complete with 6 transcendental opulences? Purport. If the Supreme Personality of Godhead is formless, how can he be said to walk very fast and accept everything offered to him? Rejecting the direct meaning of the Vedic mantras, the Mayavadi philosophers interpret them and try to establish the absolute truth as formless. Actually, the Supreme Lord has an eternal personal form, full of all opulences. The Mayavadi philosophers try to interpret the absolute truth as being without potency. However, in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, it is clearly said, Parasya Shaktir Vividai Vishuyate. The absolute truth has multi-potencies. In the Shvetashvatara Upanishad 6.8. Svabhikatina Shakti Ye Prame Haya Shakti Caitanya-caritamrita Reading. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has 3 primary potencies. Are you trying to ascertain that he has no potencies? Or are you trying to asking Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya? Purport. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu now quotes 4 verses from the Vishnu Purana, 6.7, 61 to 63, and 1.12.69, to explain the different potencies of the Lord. Vishnu Shakti Para Prokta Kshetra Kyakya Tata Para Avidya Karma Sangyanya Tritiya Shaktir Ishate. Quote, the internal potency of the Supreme Lord Vishnu is spiritual, as is verified by the Shastras. There's another spiritual potency known as Kshetra, or the living entity. The third potency, which is known as nescience, makes the living entity godless and fills him with fruitive activity. Purport. The internal potency of the Supreme Lord Vishnu is spiritual, as verified by the Shastras. There is another spiritual potency known as Kshetra, or the living entity. The third potency, which is known as nescience, makes the living entity godless and fills him with transcendental activity. With fruitive activity. I'll read that last sentence again. The third potency, which is known as nescience, makes the living entity godless and fills him with fruitive activity. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita, in Sri Krishna's discourse on the Kshetra and Kshetra, it is clearly stated that the Kshetra is the living entity who knows his field of activities. The living entities in the material world are forgetful of their eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This forgetfulness is called avidya, or nescience. The avidya shakti, the avidya potency of the material world provokes fruitive activity. Although the avidya shakti, material energy, or nescience, is also an energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is especially intended to keep the living entities in a state of forgetfulness. This is due to their rebellious attitude towards the Lord. Thus, although the living entities are continuously spiritual, they come under the influence of the potency of nescience. How this happens is described in the following verse. Yaya kshetragya shakti sa veshtita dripva sarvaga sansara tapan akilan avapnoti atra santatan. O king, the Kshetriya Shakti is the living entity. Although he has the facility to live in either the material or spiritual world, he suffers the threefold mysteries of the material world because he is influenced by the avidya nescience potency, which covers his constitutional position. Tayatiro hitatva hitatvacha shakti kshetra jasangitaha sarva bhuteshu bhupala tarat tamyena vartate. Quote, this living entity, covered by the influence of nescience, exists in different forms in the material condition. O king, he is thus proportionately freed from the influence of material energy to greater or lesser degree. Purport. The material energy acts on the living entity in different degrees according to how he acquires the association of the three modes of material nature. There are 8,400,000 species of life, some inferior, some superior, and some mediocre. The gradations of the body are calculated according to the covering of material energy. In the lower categories, including aquatics, trees, plants, insects, birds, and so forth, spiritual consciousness is almost non-existent. In the mediocre category, the human form of life, spiritual consciousness is comparatively awakened. In the superior life forms, spiritual consciousness is fully awakened. Then the living entity understands his real position and tries to escape the influence of material energy by developing Krishna consciousness. I think I'll read one more verse. I'm just getting a little late. Vladini sandini samvit twayeka sarva sangshaye Vladatapa kari mishra twayi no guna varjite. Purport. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is Satchidananda Vigraha. This means that he originally has three potencies. The pleasure potency, the potency of eternality, and the potency of knowledge. Together, these are called the Chit potency, and they are present in full in the Supreme Lord. For the living entities who are part and parcel of the Lord, the pleasure potency in the material world is sometimes displeasing and sometimes mixed. This is not the case with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because he is not under the influence of the material energy or its modes. Purport is a quotation from the Vishnu Purana 1.12.69. So I'll stop reading at this point. Any questions, comments?
It's kind of philosophical, but it's like one of the main fundamental aspects of Christian consciousness that it's personal, not impersonal.
Yeah.
And I think like when you're preaching, you have to go to someone and explain that. This is a good portion to kind of look at some references to how Caitanya explains this how the Roma.
Yes.
Yes, it's not material. There's no material God. There's no eyes, but it's a spiritual form. It's a spiritual form.
That's right.
I was thinking the same thing because my family very good at suffering and really exactly what they were saying that it's not the material form that they're thinking and it's taking the material form, but truly spiritual. Because to see it that way, and then they can really
Yeah, and it was a big. I mean, when I've described different previous classes, after Lord Buddha wiped out, or not wiped out, but rejected the Vedas to get the people to follow what he was teaching, to get them off of slaughtering animals, sacrificial animals. After that, it took hundreds of years of gradual changing back to convince people that actually God is personal. There actually is a personal God, based on the Vedas, right? So, and it's not so. It's just, and so it just couldn't be done that quickly. It had to be done over a long period of time, very slow, gradual, to make that kind of change. So, but Lord Chaitanya, he taught the highest perfection. He taught the highest perfection, and Srila Prabhupada explains that the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, these are the best teachings, because here is God himself who has personally come and is personally teaching us through these teachings and the teachings that he gave to Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, like that, of course they expanded on theirs, but that teaching was so. It's the best teaching, Srila Prabhupada says, because here's the Supreme Lord himself, who's obviously expert in everything, and then he has come, he had come, to personally teach others about about love of God and the science of love of God. So same principle here. Lord Chaitanya, this is Lord Chaitanya's teachings right here to a Maya body, trying to convince him to change over.
I have a quick question. In the previous report, it was talking about the three categories of entities, and it was talking about mediocre as the human form of life, but then the superior life form. So the superior life form is
Which verse is this?
This is verse 156.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Here's the purport.
So the superior life form that's essentially humans when they come to the stage of God realization, or is it like demigods and other?
Well, demigods apparently are considered part of the human, in that sense, human category, because when you look at the breakdown of species, there are 400,000 species of humans, and after that is all plants and animals. So the demigods are definitely not plants and animals. So they must be in the higher level of what's called human, but they're called demigods because of their position. Yeah, they're more elevated in knowledge and in different ways. But their human form, but a higher position, like that. Because there's 400,000 in the universe, 400,000 different species of human beings. So they'd be included in that sense, in the human species division. But did that answer the question, or was it something else?
I think I was just trying to figure out what would constitute the superior life form versus the mediocre life form.
I think when it says that, like, what did you say that they're spiritual all the time?
So it says in the superior life form, spiritual consciousness is a
Yeah, but to me, that when you said that, it seemed like you like come to you're spiritually awakened. That's what I.
Well,
I don't know.
well, let's read through the purport again. So, I read, but it's hard to concentrate on the details of what I'm reading. The material energy acts, this is the same purport we're talking about. The material energy acts on the living entity in different degrees according to how he acquires the association of the three modes of material nature. Okay. There are 8,400,000 species of life, some inferior, some superior, and some mediocre. The gradations of the bodies are calculated according to the covering of material energy. In the lower categories, including the aquatics, trees, plants, insects, birds, and so forth, spiritual consciousness is almost non-existent. In the mediocre categories, the human form of life, spiritual consciousness is comparatively awakened. In the superior life forms, spiritual consciousness is fully awakened. Then the living entity understands his real position. Okay, so we're talking about the three modes of material nature here. So animals and plants, animals and plants, they're in the mode of ignorance, completely forgetful. And you don't see any of the neighborhood dogs and cats and others coming here to hear the class because their conscience is somewhere else. They could not understand, even if they were there. And then higher than that, in the mode of passion, most people, most human beings, are probably at any one time more in the modes of passion, between passion and ignorance and some goodness. So those who are in the mode of passion and ignorance they can start having, at least in the human form of life, they can start understanding something about spiritual life. Those who are really the lower modes of those human beings in the lower modes of nature still have a hard time understanding spiritual life. But at least they have a human body, so there's a chance. The animals have no chance. And then in the human society, there are those in the brahmanas, or the mode of, they're mostly in the mode of goodness, and there's much greater chance of understanding spiritual life. And then, of course, the ones who are fully awakened, superior forms of life, spiritual consciousness is fully awakened, then the living entity understands his real position. So even in the modes of material nature, you can be in mode of goodness, but not really understanding anything about spiritual life, very much about spiritual life. But in the human form, by purification, then we can even transcend or start to transcend even the mode of goodness. That's spiritual life. You can be in the mode of goodness and still be not be a devotee. And then you start becoming transcendental to the modes by engaging in devotional service. That's a superior form here, superior consciousness. Then that's supposed to be referred to here. And of course, the demigods cannot get into their position without having been pretty pious in their previous lifetimes. Um, so that's my understanding. Anything, I think I should, yeah, anything to add to that? Or
It's kind of interesting actually because in one sense it says that the love was blind, like trees and plants and things. And then in the mediocre category, human form of life, spiritual consciousness is comparatively awakened. In superior life forms, seems to infer that that would be higher than the human life forms. Spiritual consciousness is fully awakened. Then the living entity understands his real position and tries to escape. To me, it would appear that he's already escaped. He's fully awakened. But here he says he tries to escape.
yeah. Well, I mean, if one's fully awakened, if one's fully awakened, they could be Krishna conscious, but still in this world, become Krishna conscious and still be here. Or it could be in the spiritual world, where of course everyone is fully awakened in spiritual consciousness. So,
I think what Prabhupada says mediocre, every now and then he gets a word that just makes me kind of smile, like make a t-shirt that I am mediocre.
hmm.
That's like a kind of good reminder.
Any other questions, comments?
It means that, like, Prabhupada, his spiritual consciousness was fully awakened.
Yes.
But at the same time, he was praying to the deities that he would never live down. One time, he was looking very intently at the deities, it was Mahakrishna, I believe it was. So what were you thinking of? He was praying that he would never live down. So even when you're fully awakened, you still have to watch out because,
Hmm. Or Shilpa was trying to. He had,
in the spiritual world, they've already escaped the material energy. They're not still battling Maya up in the spiritual world. So it must be somebody who's, consciousness is fully awakened, but he's still in the material world. He must be careful not to fall down.
yeah, or else Shilpa was, or Shilpa that's his humility, and he's feeling like that. Of course, but of course he's also praying to Krishna. He's feeling like, okay, maybe I could fall down, but he's praying to Krishna like that, and of course Krishna will not let him fall down either. There's no question Srila Prabhupada falling that ever giving up Krishna, spiritual life, Krishna consciousness. There's no question. This is a,
Where you could say, the 6 Goswamis, they were fully awakened. But at the same time, they did go through different trials to escape from material life. They had to escape from the Nawa, to Srisha,
mm-hmm.
so even if you're fully awakened, it seems, you still have to act
Yes,
free.
yes. But they didn't have to go through that. They can't. I mean, these are great Goswamis, the Rupa and Sanatan. Like they're eternal associates of the Lord. I mean, they knew they were in realization of their eternal position with Krishna. So there's no real question of them falling down. I have to take this as there is activities that they've gone through to it's just part of the plan for Lord, for the Leela. Same thing with Arjuna. Arjuna's eternal associate of Krishna. The Pandavas, the eternal associates of Lord Krishna. And yet they come and they again and again and again in that form or in some form and assist him in his pastimes in the material world, which is supposed to ultimately to attract us as conditioned souls back to Krishna. So and 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 at the end of grandfather Bhishma, when he's lying on the bed of arrows, and he's feeling, he, on one hand he's kind of lamenting that why did Arjuna and the Pandavas have to go through so much, but then he answered it himself. He said that this is just all by the arrangement of time. This is it's basically they were engaged, and they went through all this as a part of Lord Krishna's plan to do what he does. He came there to give pleasure to his devotees and to annihilate the miscreants and to reestablish religion. So they were assisting in that way. So they went through all this, but at the end, when it was all over, they never in any way lost any faith in Krishna, because they're his eternal associates. But they did go through it. Srila Prabhupada had to go through, so much and traveling across the ocean and having 2 heart attacks on the Jaladuta on his way over, and another one when he was in New York, and so many other problems. He didn't have to go through all that for his benefit. He had to go through that, or he did go through that, as a part of the
One time he was explaining to the devotees how difficult it was. They were kind of laughing, he said, "Well, Prabhupada didn't want any difficulties. Because he's going to leave our mother when difficulties." And he said, "No, it was terrible. It was so real. It was the beauty that no, it was really beautiful." So it's not like, they don't struggle, because, descended from the spiritual, they might still struggle.
I don't think
Arjuna
struggled.
Because Sanatana is talking about those souls on the phone.
yes.
I mean, even if they're liberating souls, everyone souls on the phone.
Yeah, there's a struggle, but the struggle is not for.
So even liberated souls have tests. They have tests. They might be liberated souls, but still.
I would say that it's part of the Lila, because Arjuna had struggles, but that's part of, like he's saying, that's part of the Lila in order to teach. So yes, it's not that everybody, like Arjuna.
It doesn't mean they're superficial. It doesn't mean someone's superficial. They might be very real. They might be very difficult.
Srila Prabhupada writes in the Nectar of Devotion, I think it's in chapter 34, he makes a statement that the pure devotee, means fully liberated pure devotees, cannot even perceive of material happiness or material distress. He cannot even perceive it like that. You can read it there. It's in that chapter. So how I'm not on a level I can explain it, but that he says like that. I'll show you after the class is over. Yeah, I'll show you. He actually makes that statement. Cannot even perceive of it. Yeah, I'll show you. It's there. Yeah, and actually, maybe we know Srila Prabhupada in his last weeks and months, he was conditioning his body he was in, which would have been impossible for anyone else, and yet he was somehow or other very peacefully still dictating his books. Who can do that if you're in any way affected by the condition? So.
He used to get 2 things, and how he started, he would testify. He had 2 things.
Okay. I'll just show you what he said. I didn't write the book. I just read it. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so we'll end here. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.